All right, so that's the outlay of the class. There's no textbook. If you want a textbook, I can give you some. The Bodie Kane is probably the best one out there. And if you want to go out and buy that, it covers a lot of the stuff we're covering, plus some other things. The Bodie Kane, I think, is the best just because they seem to have a good practitioner's view, not just an academic view, which I like. And you don't have to buy the latest edition. You could buy an older edition and be fine. I don't like textbooks. I've had students say they're spending $200, $300 on a textbook. I didn't spend $300 in total on an entire semester when I was an undergraduate student. So my books in total were always less than $100, and my tuition and all that was 150, $200. So I spent $300 on everything, including tuition and books. I don't know who in their right mind spends $300 on a book, except for college students. It doesn't make sense to me. So we're going to use my notes, but there are plenty of places you can go, like Wikipedia, Investopedia. We also have books in the FSC, a lot of old textbooks. Some of them are investment textbooks, some are corporate finance. You're welcome to go out and borrow those if you want. If there's some term you're trying to figure out. So you have resources, so many free resources out there. Everything we're going to talk about, if you don't like my definition, you can find a better one out there. So, we'll be using my class notes all the way throughout. The exams and the papers, there's 2 exams, 4 papers. Each exam is worth 25%. Each paper is worth 12.5, so it adds up to 100%. Exam 1 is almost all essay, and exam 2 is almost all math. The 4 papers, we'll talk about them. I encourage you to read my blog on how to be a successful college student. If y'all don't mind reading boring blogs, but I think you might find it valuable. It's my opinion, but also talking to a lot of students. And I have a lot of students that are not just successful as students, but they're now killing it as finance majors in their profession. And so one of the things you really need to do as a college student is build a portfolio. And I don't know how many of y'all have a portfolio. If you go out on LinkedIn, do you have papers on LinkedIn that you have there that you're showing as an example of your work? And if you're not, the 4 papers for this class work really well for that. All 4 of them do. They look impressive. I'll show you the formatting I like to use on the papers. So if you're not building that kind of portfolio, start it now. And this class is a great place to do it. You're going to have 4 papers here that will be exactly, every paper I do in this class is something you would do in an actual investment job. So you're doing something not just that looks professional, but it's also answering the type of questions the people you are interviewing with are asking. So it's quite impressive. I had a lot of student feedback that they've used papers from my classes really successfully. In fact, I can tell you some stories of people who got a job by simply showing a paper they wrote in my class. And it so blew away. I spoke at a conference a few summers ago with a bunch of professors, and I showed them a student paper. And they said, there's no way an undergraduate student wrote that. And I said, well, at UTSA, yeah, they do. UTSA students do write these type of papers. They're just not used to that. We had some students talk to UT Austin students, the same thing about what papers you put in LinkedIn. They say, we don't write papers in our classes. We only do multiple choice. So, this is your chance to distinguish yourself, get some high quality, good looking papers out there. So you can say, hey, I can actually write a paper. I can actually do analysis. I can do more than just multiple choice. So take advantage of this class to do that. If you're not a paper writer, and you're real uncomfortable with it, if you're a finance major, you're going to have to somehow figure that out. We write a lot in finance. I don't know how good the technical writing classes at UTSA are. I spoke to the lady who runs that area and asked her if she did ever consider developing a technical writing class just for business majors or just for finance. She thought it was a great idea, but we never could get agreement to do that. But how do you become a better writer? Well, you write a lot. But if you're not a good writer, or you don't think you're a good writer, then draft paper 1 and come set up time with me and let's sit down and I'll be brutally honest with you and show you where you can improve. Unfortunately, my first job in finance, the head of the department had an English degree, and boy, he made me a much better writer. It was pretty amazing. I could take a 4-page memo into his office. He would rip it to shreds, cut it down to 2 paragraphs, and he said more in 2 paragraphs than I said in 4 pages. And I don't know how he did it, but I started learning it over time. And some students are so focused on the volume rather than the communication, and that's what you got to focus in on. What message are you trying to give? And so I help you with that. These papers are a really good way to practice that. So the students that really do disastrous in this class are the ones who aren't engaged, who don't take my advice on exam 1, and who are uncomfortable writing papers, but they never come talk to me. They're just like, man, I'm scared he's going to think I'm stupid, so I'm just going to turn it in the way it is and hope for the best. That is not a good approach, right? Obviously, first off, you're not stupid because you're a UTSA student, so you're obviously very smart. Secondly, if you do have a problem with writing, I'd recommend you find that out before you get your grade, then after you get your grade. That seems logical to me, but so forget about being embarrassed with your professor. Who cares? Sit down and figure this stuff out. Come talk to me. Let's figure out this writing thing. I've had some students that English is a second language. I had a student from China that English was a second language, and he was always real nervous about his papers, so he'd bring them to me in advance. And I told him, your first draft before you go to your English tutor, your first draft is already one of the best papers in the class. You have nothing to worry about. But he was really, really sensitive about that. But I'm learning Spanish. There's no way I could write a paper in Spanish in a college class. So I'm really impressed with people that English is a second language are writing papers, but there are some challenges. I've worked with some students just to help them with that. So, take advantage. Communication is really important. I'm more than happy to sit down with you and help you improve your writing skills. Not that I'm the best writer in the world, but I've had some really good tutors, and I think I can add value there. Class participation, which is primarily attendance, can add as much as 2% to your grade or subtract as much as 55% of your grade. Attendance for the first 2 weeks are obviously by Zoom. After that, you need to be in the classroom. Last semester, we were much more flexible about that, but this semester, UTSA is not going to allow us to convert an in-person class to online. If you're assuming you can go this whole semester online, it's not going to work. UTSA is just not going to let us do that. I will allow you to make up absences by watching the Zoom videos and submitting notes, but I won't let you make up the whole semester doing that. I'll only give you 3 of those. If you have some special, really serious issue, then call me and talk to me. I've had students call and talk to me the last week of class. That's a little late. So if you got special issues, get to me early in the semester. Don't assume, I'll just do the whole thing by Zoom at the end of the semester. I tell them I had COVID the whole semester. That's just not going to work. All right. Talk to me early. Maybe you have to drop the class if you're assuming certain things. Better to find that early than late. If you do the course survey, you get an automatic 1%. So that's a piece of cake. So any questions on the grading? Some students complain not enough stuff, but I prefer fewer items and you do them really, really well than a bunch of stuff and you're just kind of like overwhelmed that you don't remember anything. I'd rather you get into the nitty gritty and really, really learn it.
I do have a question, but not about your grading.
Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned about a blog. I don't see it in your notes or anything, so where can I find that?
Yeah, if you go to Google and do Professor Sweets, '(S), musings, MUSING, you'll find them. My last one is on how to be a successful college student. The previous ones are almost all finance related. They're all over the place. And unfortunately, I don't write short blogs. They're all a little lengthy. But I've gotten really good feedback from students on the one about how to be a successful college student. I think it really is. I really think it works well just because I know so many students have done that. So Google that. If you can't find it, let me know and I'll send you a link. Just email me and I'll send you a link.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so the 4 papers, the first one is exactly what your boss would say. The employment report comes out on Friday. I need a report on my desk at 9:30 a.m. Going through it, all right? Usually if the report comes out at 8:30, your boss would want something on their desk by 9:30. So usually within 30 minutes to an hour. I'm taking that 30 minutes to an hour and I'm giving you several weeks. All right. You're going to do something you would normally do really, really fast. I'm giving you several weeks so you can get practice and really get into it. So why am I doing the employment report? Well, because that's the single most important economic release that there is. Juan Carlos, are you our chief economist in Investment Society? I can't remember.
No, I'm mergers and acquisitions.
Oh, mergers. Okay, so I'm thinking Eduardo. Okay, so yeah, so if you come to an investment society, we have a chief economist who will actually talk about these reports and give you some insights. Juan Carlos's brother Eduardo did an exceptional job last semester doing that. He had a website. I have to check with him what it is because I should share that with y'all. I think it was the Financial Times is what he used. There's a lot of places to go. Bloomberg is a good example. If you go to Bloomberg and just type ECO, E-C-O, all kinds of stuff come up that you can use in a paper like this. So again, it comes down to where's the data, where can I find this so I can give insights to my boss that no one else would find. So we'll get into that. I'm going to show you example. There's actually example papers out there on Blackboard that you can look at. I don't like giving examples because there's too many students that think the best way to write a paper is copy and paste. You don't want to do that. You want to write your own paper in your own style. And it's hard to copy and paste a paper that was written 2 years ago about an employment report that's coming out right now. So it's better not to copy and paste. It's better to write your own thing. But I know a lot of students do that because not only do I see some similar wording, but the order, the titles, everything's exactly like the example papers. I'm like, come on, do your own thing. Put it in your own words, your own structure. The second one, very similar, but more company specific. Your boss owns Facebook. Facebook's earnings come out. Your boss wants a report on Facebook's earnings. How did it come out? What does it mean? How did the market react? Papers 3 and 4, I combine them together, but there's two pieces of it. It's a stock valuation paper. So we'll take everything we've learned through the whole semester. The nice thing about papers 3 and 4 is I created a YouTube video where I go through that in detail, step by step, where I do that for Walmart, which means you can't do Walmart for papers 3 and 4, but I do it in detail. So you can just essentially watch the video and watch your paper while you're watching the video. Paper 2 is a paper. Bloomberg is extremely helpful for paper 2. I have a video actually shows you how to use it. You could go to the Bloomberg lab and sit down at a Bloomberg terminal for 3 or 4 hours and have the whole paper written by the time you leave. Because everything, you have to do some wordsmithing obviously after that, but there's a lot of resources here that you can really do some impressive things with the resources UTSA is providing. So you don't need to worry about papers 2 or 3 or 4 yet. Well, you can't do much on paper 1, but there are some things you could read ahead on if you'd like to. I want to show you an example paper just so you have. Okay, let me check the chats. Okay, on the PowerPoint yeah, since you're auditing, I assume you have access. So everything in the PowerPoint is in the class notes. All right, so I don't add anything new. So I don't generally put the PowerPoint out there because it's redundant. What I don't want to do is you have a PowerPoint and you have the class notes, send it with 2 things you got to keep track of. So everything I do in PowerPoint is exactly word for word the same as in the class notes. So you don't end up with 2 things. But if you want to email me, I don't mind forward them to you. I don't think they'll add much. All right, let me share an example paper here. Well, that's not what I wanted. So, sorry. Where am I going here? Let me try this. There we go. All right, so here's an example paper. I got his approval to do this. So Ben Vargo, one of our very, very successful students, he's in the investment world now. I think he's on the buy side now. He started off on the sell side, but really sharp student from Europe. Really is just acing it out I need to check with him, see where he is now. I can't remember. He's been changing jobs mainly because headhunters are going after him. So he's a good example of a student who was successful at UTSA. This is a paper from 5 years ago. So the format we're using here is a format that's based on what you would typically see in a really high professional journal. So a good title, an abstract. I love abstracts. You don't have to do an abstract, but I love abstracts. What does the abstract say? It can do one or two things. Your abstract can say what you're doing in the paper. So in this paper, I'm going to do this. Or the abstract could give a really quick high-level summary. Jobs report came out, it was very weak, markets reacted negatively, something like that. So you have to kind of decide. He decided to do a summary of the report. What's the most important salient factors that came out of this report? And he put that in his abstract. And then 2 columns. The one thing he didn't do that I prefer full justification. He didn't do that. But 2 columns, and really important, 2 columns of very narrow, very narrow margins. All right. If you go down to the Financial Studies Center, I have my old financial analyst journals in there. Just pull those out and look at what a professional journal article looks like. All right. I don't know if y'all published papers like this before. I know Sebastian, you did, because you use this format in my 3013. You want something that makes it look like you're a professional writer. Okay. What don't you want to do? I don't like 1 column. I think it looks like a college paper. Double space is the worst thing you can do. Don't use double space or 1.5 space ever again the rest of your life. It looks like a college student. I know college students think, wow, a 7-page paper gets a higher score than a 4-page paper. That is not true. It just looks so unprofessional. All right. I mean, if you had this on LinkedIn, would you be embarrassed by it? Anybody may say, man, that's a really horrible looking paper. Notice what I did on quotes. I really like this on long quotes. You center the italicizing. Doesn't that look very professional all the way through? Graphs with good titles, good marking. What is he trying to do? He's trying to communicate a story. He's trying to tell a story to the boss so that they can make decisions. Good use of titles, what he's talking about, some bolding. All right, so you want to look real professional. I will put, I think there's one of these documents, example, at least one of them that's a Word document. So you can actually use that Word document. I don't think he did the abstract. So, if I need to give kind of a template, just at least for the format, I can certainly put that out there for you. But I'm not saying you have to use this format. I don't count off if you don't. I'm more worried about you getting jobs. And this format just looks so much more professional. I know the paper I showed at the conference with all these other professors use this format, and I could hear gasp when I brought it up. They're like, there's no way a college student wrote that paper. And they were thinking graduate students. So no, that was an undergraduate student. And that was a 50-something page paper that he wrote in my security analysis class. They were just blown away. It's amazing. College professors don't expect much out of students. You guys are far more capable of just incredible work, but we just don't ask it from you. But I know you're capable of it. So something really looks really professional all the way throughout. All right. So I highly recommend something similar to this. You have 3 papers out there to give you some examples. Don't worry about the content yet, because we'll definitely get into that as we get closer. There's a paper 1 description that talks about what all you need to do. So that definitely is there. But you can see how he goes all the way to the very, very end. So good use of quotes, which is one thing at an entry-level job. I don't, this is going to sound kind of bad, but your boss may not care about your opinion all that much because they figure out you just graduated. Your boss is more interested in your research of other people's opinion. You can put your opinion in there and they're interested in it, but they want it confirmed in some way. So look at the way Ben did it. I like the way he did it. He talked about other people's opinion, and then he said, I agree. That's a powerful way to do it, right? So-and-so, Bill Gross at PIMCO said this. And his argument was this: I agree with that. I think he makes a lot of sense. You know, that's a good way to get both your opinion and an expert's opinion in there. So one of the things your boss is looking for, can you go out there and find great insights from people that are in the business, that are managing money, that are economists, whatever. You know, go out there and find those kind of things. As I tell students, one of the most important things in your first job is if you focus on making your boss look like a genius, you'll do really well in your first job. Your second job is when you focus on making yourself look like a genius. But in your first job, you try to make your boss look like a genius. And boy, that is a really successful tactic. If you're thinking, what does my boss need? What is she trying to do? What is she trying to improve? With whom is she meeting? She's busy, she doesn't have much time. How can I get this to her so she looks like a genius? You do that, she's not looking over her shoulder worrying that you're trying to take her job. She's going to give you great promotions. She's going to be your advocate for the rest of your career. Just focus on it. It makes it a lot easier too. If you're focused on getting yourself ahead, it becomes distracting. You're constantly trying to beat your other peers. You focus on your boss. So that's what you do in this paper. You're trying to make your boss look like a genius. What can you tell her in this paper? So if she's sitting down with the CEO and the CEO says, hey, what was that employment report all about? She's going to just blow him away or her away with just incredible insights. All right. So keep that as your focus. All right. Let me stop sharing. I'll interrupt with questions as you have them. Sorry, I'm so slow. There we go. Okay. All right. Any questions on the papers? I mean, you don't really need to worry about them until it's time. Are y'all writing papers in your classes? Your junior year, right? You should be writing papers in almost every class you take at this point. I even tell students, if you have, especially in your major, in the accounting, you can kind of get away with multiple choice in accounting, but in your major, especially for finance or real estate or management, if you have like 2 classes, one professor is all multiple choice and the other one writes papers and projects, I would take the paper and project one. It may be a little more stressful and a little more work, but that's what you actually do in practice. Your boss is not going to come to your desk and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying Apple stock. Is it worth A, 450, B, 5? You know, that doesn't happen in finance. You've got to put your thoughts down in paper, organize it. The other thing we do undergraduate, which really bugs me, is we need you to value stock. So we give you all the inputs. You plug them in a really simple formula and give me an answer. That's not how finance works. Guess what? In a job in finance, all those inputs the professor gave you, you got to come up with those on your own. And that's what we're going to do on paper 3 and 4. Rather than me giving you a beta, me giving you growth rates, you need to come up with them. That's what finance is. Finance is coming up with the assumptions, not taking the assumptions and plugging them into really simple formulas. So, you know, try to get yourself, now that you're a junior or senior year, get out of the student mode and start thinking about yourself as a finance professional. That you're actually making decisions, you're actually doing analysis that's going to, you know, people are going to put money, billions of dollars based on your decision. Start getting to that mindset. And that'll really help you in interviews too, because you'll start talking in those ways. I don't see any questions on the papers. Let's talk a little bit more about paper 1. Just real quickly, I'm going to come back to that. Oh, well, let's talk about the exam 1. All right, so how can you prepare for exam 1? You have a class where, you know, all you've got to do right now for the next few weeks is prepare for exam 1. And does that mean you just come to class and listen, or do you need to be doing things outside of class? I'm going to say, if to be successful in this first exam, you're going to have to do stuff outside of class. All right, you don't have a book to read. You have class notes that you can read. So one thing you can definitely do is read the class notes in advance of the discussions. I'll give you some each week, some insights on how far I think I'm going to go the next week. So do that. Google key terms. So if you don't know a certain term that I'm using in the notes, you're not familiar with it, Google it. Do be careful though in finance. Some terms have multiple meanings. So just, I'm gonna use some terms in this. We're talking about growth and value, talk about beta. The term beta itself has multiple meanings. In finance, I don't mean beta versus, VHS or whatever those, or beta, some technologies, beta testing or whatever. But just inside finance, beta has taken on a life of its own. Beta is a number in the capital asset pricing model. You saw that in 3013, but it means a lot of other things. And so be careful when you Google these terms, because you may be getting a definition that we're not using in our class. But as you'll see in my blog, that may give you an excuse to call me, which is what you're looking for, right? You're trying to create a network with your peer students and with your professors. You go, hey, I Googled that term, professor, and boy, I can't make sense of it in terms of your notes. You now have an excuse to go talk to your professor. I don't know how often y'all talk to your professors. You should be talking to professors a lot. I'm going to be the one that's writing references for you. There's a guy who just got a job at Victory Capital because I sent his name over there. I sent 5 students over to Victory Capital. I'll be an advocate for you, but I can't be an advocate for you if I don't know who you are. So, interact with your professors, get to know them, make sure they know who you are, then ace the class. It's hard for me to be an advocate if you made a D in the class, but if you're doing well in the class, you're engaged, I know who you are. Yeah, I will absolutely fight to get you jobs, and I'm actually pretty good at it because I have a lot of contacts in the industry. So, this is a chance. Google the term, you don't understand it, give me a call, ask another professor. My crazy professor Sweet's using this term and I don't understand it. How do you understand that term? Any excuse you have to interact with your professors, you should take it. Write out your answer as we go. So exam 1, you technically could copy and paste exam 1. That'd be your answer. You'll make a 0 because you're plagiarizing your professor. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to do copy and paste. So what do? Well, you go through the class notes, you read it, you listen to the lecture, you read it again, you Google some terms, and then you sit down off the top of your head and you write that part of your answer out in your own words without looking at stuff, all right? Get it into your permanent memory. So write it out as we cover the material without any copy and paste, everything in your own words, all right? And don't keep referencing the notes. Sit down on a blank piece of paper and try to write 2 or 3 paragraphs on how you understand it. And even better than that, do a group me or something with other students in the class and start talking to each other. Sit down. There's a difference between typing, writing, and speaking. If you can actually sit down with someone and speak the answer to them, tell them, your brain will remember it in different ways. Or, you see it, you see your rich uncle this semester. Sit down with him. He says, hey, you're taking this investment class. Tell me what you know. Sit down with him and don't give him advice. That may be a little dangerous since you're just now taking this class. But pretend, uncle, let me pretend like I'm giving you financial advice and let's sit down and go through this. And just do it off the top of your head. Don't reference anything and just see how it goes. So start getting this, not just for the exam, but getting it so that it becomes a permanent part of your memory. So try to move from the student to the professional. What does it mean to be a professional? It means that you know something the average person out there doesn't know. So what do you know that someone's going to pay you $500,000 for? What can you sit down and say, hey, come to me with your problem. I know this backwards and forwards. I can show you exactly what to do. And if they sit down with you and say, I'll tell you exactly what to do. Let me get this textbook out and I'll read about it and I'll tell you what to do. That's probably not going to give them a lot of confidence. If you go to the doctor's office and you say, I got a pain in the side and say, well, I think it's an appendix. Let me get my anatomy book out because I can't remember which side the appendix is on. You might not stay at that doctor. So you just need to know this stuff off the top of your head. You don't need to be looking it up. So that's how I want you to address this exam. As we go through the material, you sit down, grapple with it, research it, and then put it into your own words. And as I say, call or email me. Find excuses to call and talk, not just to me, but to your other professors. John Tui teaches the fixed income class. He's a really good guy to know. He took my place at UTSA when I retired. He's got a lot of practical experience. You got professors like Baynod and Peckham that are academic types that are incredibly well researched and really great people too, really fun to talk to. Go ask them questions. find excuses to go talk to your professors. And then discussion groups, as we said, talk to each other. You can't copy each other's notes. I would not send your sample answer to a peer. You'll be shocked how many students say, I just want to see what you're doing so I can do my own, and then they submit your work. You never want to do that. There's some students that they're just desperate for someone else to do all their work for them. So don't do that, but you can certainly talk to them saying, this is what I'm seeing, this is how I'm understanding it. All right, so it is a different type of an exam question, and some students score 5–6% on it, not because they're not smart, but it's because they just assumed they prepared for the exam just like they did in the other exam, and you can't do that with this one. You're gonna have to sit down and really grapple with the material. It's not particularly difficult material. There are some points. We're gonna talk about convexity. A lot of people struggle with convexity. It's a tough term. It's kind of tough to understand, but it's not 90% of the exam. So if you really mess up convexity, it's not going to kill you. It's just one thing on the exam. Most of the material is pretty straightforward. So, but the key is that you put it into your permanent memory as fast as you can. Okay, and then on paper one, we talked about paper one. One thing I do want to do, so you start getting practice on this, because this is a major issue on paper one. Students lose a lot of paper, a lot of points. Is students really struggle with how to define what the market's doing. And I've been in this business for so long, I just assumed all students knew how to do this. And then I started noticing an exam that, oh my word, they don't know this. So let me show you, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Boy, you think I'd be better at Zoom by now, but okay. So here's the market today. Somewhat disappointing, right? Because it opened up about 0.5% and then it closed off almost 1%. So how would you define this? So let's start off in paper one. You're going to talk about the markets. What's the markets? Well, you got the stock market. Well, there's more than one stock market. So which stock market? What's the stock market you think will always be in your paper? And you might have a guess. It's up there on the paper. Which one do you think would be the most important stock market to talk about?
Would it be the S&P 500?
S&P 500, exactly. That's the most common followed market in the world. All right, so you got the stock market. We have indexes. We have the bond market. Well, what bond market is on the, can y'all see a bond market on that list?
Ten-year bond.
Yeah, 10-year bond.
So which 10-year bond is that? Is that a corporate bond? Is it a municipal bond? Is it a UK bond? What do y'all think? Treasury, yeah. What's the only interest rate on Yahoo Finance? The 10-year Treasury. Why? Because that's the single most important interest rate in the entire world. All right, you got the bond market. You also have some commodities. Y'all see any commodities up there?
Crude oil and gold.
Gold.
Crude oil and gold, exactly. So, so how do we handle these? So let's start off with what we have to work here. So the first thing on the stock market is these are indices. Well, that's important. These aren't dollars. The S&P 500 is not $4,532.76. These are not dollars. This is an index. All right. Then the bond market. What do we have here? We have a yield. It's not a price. It's a yield. It's an interest rate. We can't talk about interest rates the same way we talk about indices. And in commodities, what are the commodities shown as? Those are actually dollars, right? So we got three different things. You can't talk about these three different things using the same terminology. So how do we talk about them? So let me show you how I do the S&P, and you notice the wording that I use. S&P 500 stock index was down 44 points to close at 4532.76, down 0.97%. All right, what's the three things I put in there? The change in points, the closing value, and the change in percents. Okay, that's real important. You notice I'm using a percent there. All right, anybody want to try that for the NASDAQ? Any takers?
Sure.
All right, go for it.
The NASDAQ index was down 167 points to close at 14,340, down 1.15%.
Perfect, very good. I don't know who said that, but very good. Yeah, perfect. So I used points. Why didn't I say it was down $44? You can do that in an interview. Wow, the S&P was down $44 a day. They're going to look at you funny and say, oh, college student. Not a professional in finance, is a college student. Why don't we say $44? I don't know why. I mean, certainly it's in dollars in some sense, but because it's all the stock prices to get, all that, it's some kind of formula they have that's based on dollars, but we just don't say that. We say the S&P is down 44 points. All right. Now, NASDAQ, if you talk about NASDAQ in your paper, mainly tech stocks, right? NASDAQ's been really struggling lately. These tech stocks that just boomed the last few years, they're starting to pull back, mainly because interest rates are rising. We'll talk about that later. Why do tech stocks and growth stocks not like higher interest rates? We'll get into that. All right. Then the bond market. The bond market is in yield. So let me type this one, and you're going to find this is the one where students have the biggest problem. Some students just so tough for them. So 10-year Treasury yield. You're ready for this? 3.8 basis points to close at 1.827% as bonds rallied. All right, so what do we have here? First, I say it's the yield. That's really important. I didn't say the 10-year Treasury was down 3.8 basis points. I said the 10-year Treasury yield fell. Why am I using basis points? We'll have to talk about that. The close, I put the closing, and then I said, what does that mean for markets? So there's a lot of things we have to do here. Are we talking about the Treasury's price or the interest rates? You almost never talk about the 10-year Treasury price, the actual price. You don't say the 10-year Treasury was 102.21. You can find that. It's out there. If you go to Bloomberg, you will find the 10-year Treasury price, but we don't talk about that. Why? Because there's like 8 or 9 or 10 10-year Treasuries, right? There's not one. The U.S. government did not issue debt for 10 years exactly today. So what is that 10-year Treasury? It's a Treasury that matures in about 10 years. There may be 6 of them, all right? So this is kind of a composite number, and so it's an interest rate. We don't really know what the price is. The 10-year Treasury we're looking at could be a 20-year Treasury that was issued 10 years ago. That's going to be a lot different price than a 15-year Treasury that was issued 5 years ago. One might be at 102, one might be at 101. All right. So prices on Treasuries mean nothing. On bonds, prices don't mean anything. It's the yield. What is a basis point? All right. So a basis point equals 0.0001. So 100 basis points. Anybody know? 100 basis points is what? 0.01%, 0.1%, 1%, 10%. What's 100 basis points? Any guesses? I heard someone say
1%.
1%. Exactly.
1 or 1%? Yeah.
100 basis points is 1%. All right, so here's the question that students really struggle with. Why are we using basis points? Y'all notice how did I use the 2.04%? Y'all see that in my answer? Why don't we talk about the 10-year Treasury being down 2%? Well, let me just tell you this. If something is in percents, we don't talk about its change in percents. It's too confusing. to say the 10-year treasury is down 2.04%, do we mean the yield went from 2% down to 1.96%, or do we mean the yield went from 2% to 0? What does that mean? It's down 2%. It's very, very confusing. If you say the 10-year treasury is down 3.8 basis points, there's no confusion whatsoever. All right. Very, very straightforward. No confusion. Now, why didn't I say, you could say this, we could have said the S&P was down 97 basis points. We could have said that, right? If you do that in an interview, that's not wrong. Here's what they're going to think. This is a college student trying to show off using terms we don't really use in finance. They're going to think you're trying to show off and you're kind of getting out of your league. You can do it. S&P was down 97 basis points today, but we just say the S&P was down 0.97%. Why can we say that? Because S&P is an index. It's not a percent. All right. So it's down 3.8. Now, when interest rates fall, what do bond prices do? They go up. So Yahoo Finance is in error by making this in red. This should be in green, right? If you go to Bloomberg and look at this, they actually have very similar things, but it's in green. Because interest rates falling means the bond prices are going up. All right. So bond prices rallied. Now, what term will we use here? We'll talk about this probably some next class. Is 3.8 basis points a big deal or a small deal? So one thing you need to learn is the standard deviations of these things. And we'll talk about it next class. A one standard deviation on the S&P 500, that's a big event, right? One standard deviation is a pretty big event. The S&P historically, a one standard deviation is about 1%. So today was a big day for the markets. All right, it was down an entire standard deviation. That's a pretty big event. One standard deviation on treasury yields is about 6.5 basis points. So today was not a huge day, but it was kind of a medium day. Wasn't a small day, wasn't down half a basis point. 3.8 is not huge, but it's not small. All right. So you got to pick your term. I would not say rally, to me almost sounds too strong, as bonds rose, but it gets tough. Do I say rose slightly? Rose, I don't know. It gets tough to pick. 3.8, if it had fallen 12 basis points, I would say, as bonds had a strong rally, that would be a big number. All right. So you can see how you can't pick your adjectives or adverbs without knowing the standard deviation of markets. You'll see that it's really, really important. So how do you get those? I'll show you next class. You can pull that data in really quickly and figure that out. All right. Let's do one more, and then I'll open up for a few more questions here. Now, commodities are in dollars. So we can say, I can't see it. So oil was down. What do y'all think? Oil's in dollars. What can I say? Do I say 1 point, 117 basis points? What do I say? It's in dollars, so what can I say? Not down, I'm sorry, it's up. Sorry, wow, y'all got, man, that's really confusing. It's up what? $1, right? Why can I say $1? Because crude oil is in dollars. So if you're in an interview and say, wow, oil was up $1 today, $4 a day, whatever, that doesn't sound like a college student. It sounds like someone knows what we're talking about. Closing. Now, this is the tricky part. That's oil, but which oil is that? Is it Texas? Is it Brent? There's different oils out there. I can't remember what Yahoo Finance uses. I've forgotten. I think it's West Texas, but I can't remember. Well, whatever it is. So there's more than one. If you go to FinViz, really good website, finviz.com, and click on futures. They'll show you both the Brent and the Texas, so you can get that number. So I can't remember. Someone could check and see which one it is. So when you say oil was up $1, it gets a little tricky because there's more than one oil. All right, gold's a little easier because there's only one gold. We have one number we quote, but oil, because there's more than one way it's quoted, it can be a little tricky. So you're probably better off if it is Brent was up. Here you might say Brent crude.
It's Brent.
rent, it was up $1. So closing that, so you might be a little clearer here. Use a dollar sign. You notice I didn't use a dollar sign on the S&P 500 or 1.17. I don't say basis points, right? Because it's oil prices is not a percent. It's a dollar. The only time you use basis points if you're talking about the change in a percent. But if you're in dollars or indices, just give me the percentage change. Okay. Now, be real careful. Some students will tell me the S&P index was down 44 basis points. That is not correct. It was down 44 points. Everybody understand the difference between basis points and points, right? The index is down points. The treasury is down basis points. Can y'all tell that's 3.8? You're going to get used to how Yahoo Finance puts in there. This is 182 basis points. So you take the dot out, 182 basis points. So this is 3.8 basis points. All right. You'll just have to kind of get used to that. It's kind of strange the way they do it. I don't really like the way Yahoo Finance does the 10-year treasury. It's a bit confusing. Okay, so what do you need to do? You got to make sure if it's an index, you do points. If it's a yield, you do basis points. If it's commodity, you do the dollars. If it's an index or in dollars, you do percentage change. If it's a yield, you do the basis points change. You don't talk about price at all, except for whether it's up or down on treasuries. Then you just got to pick your adjective. All right. So that's the kind of thing you want to sound as professional. Now, if you want to sound really like a professional, then don't say basis points, say bips. Then they think, wow, this person knows what they're talking about. So the 10-year treasury fell 3.8 bips. Sounds a little more, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. Okay. And I don't know about you, if in an interview, how many of y'all want to sound like you know what you're talking about in an interview? Anybody have that desire? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I should have seen my interview with UTSA. I don't know why they hired me. Boy, I was fortunately one of the interviewers saved me. I gave such a stupid answer. And one of the other interviewers said, what are you saying? And the other lady, Pat, I remember her name. She goes, no, this is what he meant. And I was like, yeah, that's what I meant. She saved me. But yeah, you want to sound like you know what you're talking about. You don't want to sound like a college student. So these things like 10-year treasury fell 3.8 bips, closing at 1.872%. So bonds were up some today. Yeah, that's not a college student. That sounds like someone who's been in the field. So how do you get there? You just got to practice it. Start looking at markets. Start using the terminology with each other. One thing for sure, you don't want to walk into an interview today and not know the S&P was down almost 1%. That would be bad, right? So before you go on an interview, I would definitely know the S&P. You probably want to know the NASDAQ. Definitely know the 10-year treasury. Oil and gold would probably be good to know. There's certain things they just expect you to know because you're finance, right? They expect you to be living and breathing this stuff every single day. So get into the habit of watching markets and then type it out. Just what we did here, just start typing it out so it just becomes part of your normal lingo. Because what you don't want to do in an interview is go, yeah, the S&P was down 44 points and it closed at $4,500. I mean, 45.3276, and it was down 97 bips. I mean, 9.9. You gotta it's gonna rattle off your tongue like with split second without any thought about it. The only way you can get that is just practice over and over and over again. All right. So I do count off on this on the exam. If you say the S&P was down $44, I'm not going to count off much. If you say it was down 97 basis points, I don't count any off on that because it's not wrong. It just sounds strange to finance people. I will definitely count off. A lot of students lose points by not talking about treasuries correctly. So we'll practice this more. Actually, next Monday, I'll bring this up again on Monday and I'll ask for volunteers to tell us what the market did. So be ready. If I don't get volunteers, I'll randomly start calling on people, which, stresses people out. So start practicing. Some of you already have this down and say, I can't believe, he doesn't think we already know this. I just know from prior classes, probably 70, 80% of students are real shaky on this just because it's not part of their normal daily routine. So, all right. Let me real quickly on my goals for this class. I'm going to organize material based on my experience in finance. I'm going to give you stuff that I really, truly believe it's going to be state of the art, what people are talking about, so you can be confident using this in interviews. I want you to question what's going on, be engaged, be skeptical. I don't want you to be cynical. You're too young for that, but be skeptical. Read and start thinking outside of class. I'll put I think I already have put my book reading list out there, recommended reading list. I'm on a bike 3 hours a day. In fact, Friday, if I make it to Friday, I would have ridden a bike 2,500 days in a row without missing a single day. Tomorrow's going to be a little brutal in 30-degree weather. And I've averaged over 3 hours a day. People say, well, that's a little excessive compulsive, but no, I'm out there reading books. I'm out there listening to podcasts. My bicycle time is when I read and I'll listen. There's a podcast I love. I encourage all of y'all to start reading it. I think it's just exceptional. It's called Business Breakdowns. I don't know if any of y'all read that one, Carlos. I don't remember if I showed you that one or not. It's a really, really good one. I think I showed it to the Investment Society. Excellent website. Every time I listen to it, it's like, man, this is the stuff I wish I had when I was in college. It's really, and I got other some of the podcasts are on my reading list as well. So, you're going to be spending the next 50 years of your life doing this. If you're bored, then change majors. You shouldn't be bored at 22, right? Change majors. But if you love this stuff, now if you're intimidated by it and you're stressed, that's okay, because this is hard stuff. It's okay to think, man, this is a lot of stuff. I don't know if I can learn all this. Feeling overwhelmed and intimidated is fine. The key is that you find it interesting. If you find it interesting, you're going to be fine. It's going to work. But you're not going to get it all at once. But you got to start listening to various people in different types of formats. And if y'all have podcasts that you love or blogs that you love, send them over and we'll share them with the class. You need to be doing that kind of thing because you got to become a critical thinker. You're going to be moving a lot of money. I remember the first time I did a transaction for $1 billion, picked up the phone and traded $1 billion. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. That seems like nothing today when you have a BlackRock that has $10 trillion in assets. $1 billion is like nothing. But for me, as a young analyst, I'm thinking, wow, $1 billion sounds like a lot of money. We're moving other people's money. We're making decisions that's going to impact their lives. We better know what we're doing. We better know how to question things, challenge things, make sure we don't make a terrible mistake. So it's critical thinking. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm telling you, here's the conventional approach. Here's some of my challenges of convention. You got to know this because you can't go out into this field without knowing the conventional approach, how everybody else is thinking. But then you've got to start challenging it, listen to other ideas, and really getting into it. Come every class ready to learn. One thing that irritates the life out of me is students in class sitting there with nothing in front of them. Empty desk. Whenever a student comes to class and says, I'm absolutely sure this professor will not say anything of value to me today, but he checks attendance, so I'm here. I hate that. It's like, don't even come to class. So even if you don't expect to take notes, have paper and pencil there just so you can at least pretend like I might accidentally say something of value to you. All right, but you should be taking notes. You'll see in my blog what I did with notes at UT Austin. I think it's the reason I remember so much of my undergraduate. I went back and looked at every class I took undergraduate, and about 50% of them I could remember very detailed things from those classes. Pretty amazing. I just listened to Dawkins' The History of Time, and I took 6 hours of astronomy in undergraduate, and the whole first part of that book is like, I know all this stuff, I've already heard it, but it's been 30 years. So why? Because the way I engaged, and it was because I was a genius back there. Back then I was just scared to death, so it drove me to kind of be overkill on the learning. So I'm really glad I did that, because now I remember so much of that stuff. So find ways to get this stuff so that you engage with it. Prepare before class. I don't like them when students leave in the middle of class unless you just got something serious going on. I would recommend you don't even bring your cell phone to class. Studies have shown a cell phone, even if completely turned off, is distracting. Students do worse if they have a cell phone versus they don't. If you're going to use computers, I'm going to think about this as we get into it. I'll let y'all know. I think you're better off taking handwritten notes, but I know most students prefer to type. Studies have shown handwritten notes, you remember stuff much better than typing, but I want you to write me incredibly great papers. I want to take your paper and run upstairs to Dr. Baynot and say, you cannot believe an undergraduate student wrote this paper, and for good reasons, not for bad reasons. No cheating, no plagiarism. You know, you're gonna have to prove yourself in the interviews and your job market. Start doing your own stuff. Be interested, look interested, challenge your professor, ask me great questions, blow me away with your greatness, and I will absolutely fight to get you a job. And I'm really good at getting students jobs because I know what employers are looking for. I've had employers call me about a student, and at the end of the call, they're like, I need to shut this call off because I'm scared the student's gonna get a job somewhere else. I want to call them right now, I'm offering a job. I'm really good at the right keywords. So, you know, use this as a chance to get to know a professor really, really well. Investment side, we'll talk a little bit more about that. We have Juan Carlos in the class, and he's one of our presenters, so he can talk to you as well. Our first meeting is going to be January 31st, and I'll give you more details on that. But if you read my blog, it doesn't have to be the Investment Society. There's other groups. But one thing that's absolutely true today and essential is employers do not want students that are nothing more than students. You're going to have something else. And the Investment Society gives you a bunch of things you can put on your resume that meet that criteria that don't take a tremendous amount of time. And so that's kind of our goal is, 30, 45 minutes a week. And you can put something in your resume that gets you noticed that other students won't be noticed. And we know that from history. We actually have employers. There's one employer that has said, I only want to hire UTSA Investment Society members because we've been doing that the last few years and they've blown us away. Why would we waste time anywhere else? That's pretty impressive. So, it's an opportunity to really build your resume, build your network. Your network is your professors. Your network is also your fellow students. So get to know your fellow students as well. That's one of the problems with this being online.